Hello, and welcome to Holistic Ambition, where we talk with visionary leaders who are redefining what it means to be ambitious. We cover ways you can live with more well-being, meaning, and fun in your career, business, and relationships. I'm your host, Stephanie Thoma, career coach for ambitious professionals and author of Confident Introvert. Today, we have Jessica with us. Jessica Nuremberg is a single mother by choice who has preserved a long and arduous journey to have her unicorn baby girl, Kaya Lily. Professionally, Jessica is a revenue driver with a long career in brand partnerships, having worked at startups to Fortune 500s. For the last 20 years, she has lived in New York and London and Los Angeles, where she currently resides near the beach with her baby Kaya. She is also a certified yoga instructor, as well as runs a sponsorship program for children in Kenya. Today, we will explore her journey to motherhood. My goodness, I'm so curious to just dive in here and learn about when you first discovered and knew that you wanted to be a mother.
So, hi. And ever since I was a little girl, and as I hear my little girl crying downstairs, I knew that I wanted to be a mom. It was one of those things that was innate to me. I have lots of friends who have gone through, not potentially a single motherhood journey, but have gone through the motherhood journey that didn't necessarily have that innate maternal instinct. And then once they had their kids, all of a sudden it came out. But for me, it was ever since as far back as I can remember, having all the Barbies and all of the different gunned animals and playing with them. So since day one, as far back as I can go.
And this is something that you've known since the very beginning, like, yep, this is a part of your life path. And, something that you shared in the pre-call that people should know about is your journey or your decision to freeze your eggs and how that went and what people can expect when they go ahead and do that.
So I was 30, just about 32, turning 33 when I'd broken up with a long-term boyfriend of 4 years. And prior to that, I was in 18 years of relationships, like all in, including that 4-year journey. And I got to this 33 years old and holy gosh, I'm not getting married and I'm not having a kid tomorrow. And I wanted to be a mother. So I decided to move forward in freezing my eggs. And at the time it was 2014, the new technology that we all know today, which is called, and for those doctors listening, I might not have it correctly, completely correct, but it's a fast freeze, kind of like Dippin' Dots of where they flash freeze the eggs. And that came out in 2012. So it was only a few years in. So I decided to go forward and freeze my eggs. And I had low AMH at the time, which meant that I looked like I was older on the chart than I actually was. So I didn't have great results to first start. So I ended up doing 4 cycles in one given year. And I actually started to date somebody through this experience, but decided that I knew I wanted to be a mom and I didn't want to get off that journey. So I kept on moving forward, even through this relationship, which is no longer. So I'm glad I did. And with those 4 freezes, I ended up with 35 eggs, which I then thought would be the journey to my future path, whether it was with a partner or solo.
Yeah. So, the statistic, NYU Fertility Center says that when you freeze your eggs, there's a 39% chance that it'll work, 61% chance that it won't. So can you tell us about where you were in that stat?
Yep. So I was then from there, I had broken up with that boyfriend I'd mentioned. So really glad that I took this into my own hands. And I also implore people to think about, even if they are in relationships, like think about yourself first and make sure you protect yourself first, because you're only as fertile as you are today. Tomorrow, you will not be as fertile as you are today. So fast forward, I ended up moving to London with my job. That brought me to around 35 years old. And I lived in London for a couple of years. Which was an incredible experience, but I still didn't meet that person that I was looking for. And now I was coming into my late 30s and moved back to America. And I came to Los Angeles, and I had lived here about 20 years ago. So previously I had an experience of living here, and I just wanted a calmer lifestyle, which brought me back to LA. And when I got here about a year in, COVID happened. So all of a sudden I'm sitting at home alone, as we all did. And there was nowhere to meet somebody, literally, unless you're meeting them virtually. And that wasn't happening. So I was in this place of turning 40 and knowing that my time was limited. So I made the decision that I was going to move forward to try to be a single mother. And that was a long process, which I'll talk through, but essentially it started with first having to find donor sperm, which in itself took me a really long time to get okay with the fact that this would be the story of my child's life. So as of today, I think she has like 28 brothers and sisters. that are already documented. So it's just an interesting and crazy experience of even getting yourself mindfully like over that hump. And once I did and I chose that donor sperm, I went to defrost my eggs. So I sent my eggs and my sperm together to a facility in New York. And we went to go fertilize those eggs. And I thought, okay, great. I'm going to get embryos and then I'll, implant an embryo and I'll be a mom. And I got the phone call from my doctor that my eggs did not work. And I was completely gutted because I had this whole vision that of course they would work. How could they not work? I had so many eggs and I was so young, and there is no reason of why. This is the challenge with egg freezing. They can't tell you if it's they can't tell you why the quality of the egg didn't work. Is it the sperm with the egg? Is it your egg? Is it the defrosting process? Was it the freezing process? There's all these big question marks. So unfortunately, long story short, I was left with no embryos, which then catapulted me into the next phase of fertility. And I was now, nearing 41 at this time.
Yes. And okay, so when it comes to being in this space of, being in a relationship and then that not really working out and then moving around and discovering that after you find this donor that it's just not working out for a reason that you won't really know. We talked a bit about the difference between egg freezing and embryo freezing. Which one is superior?
So embryo freezing far superior. And the reason is it's that you can test an embryo. So you know what you're working with. An egg is a single cell. And again, I'm not a doctor here, but from what I've learned, an egg is a single cell and you're not able to test it. So you can have a lot of eggs at a young age and think like I did, because I was a lot of eggs, young age. So it was like, yay, great, North Star. But unfortunately, as you see my story, it didn't pan out that way. So because you can't test an egg, the challenge is that only until you make it into an embryo are you able to say, do I have anything viable to work with? Do I have a chance of a biological child? And it's called the IVF funnel because the attrition rates of each time going from having a lot of eggs to then fertilizing the eggs to then growing them into a day 5, 6, or 7 embryo and then testing those embryos, it literally goes through a funnel of where you end up with very, very few. And the only way to know with what you end up with is to go through the process of creating an embryo. If I could give my younger self any advice, it would have been to potentially have used half of my frozen eggs at a young age to make embryos with donor sperm, even if I wasn't sure if this was the journey I was going to go on, because an embryo can just stay frozen. You don't have to implant it. And that way I would have known what I was working with. But because I didn't do that, what happened was now nearing this 41 mark, I had to go into doing fresh cycles. So I had already done 4 retrievals back in my early 30s. And here I was again, going back under the anesthesia and all the medications to try again. And as we get older, that egg quality, while they can't test it, they test it by knowing the number of eggs at a later stage that do turn into embryos. And you can Google all the information around it. And everyone knows as you enter your 40s, it is not a pretty story.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's this lesson of sort of, things shifting in your 40s and being caught off guard with this decision that you had to make pretty quickly. So can you tell us a bit about, you've mentioned a few things when it comes to, let's say, different lessons that you've learned when it comes to insurance, when it comes to PGA testing. Can you please walk us through those things?
Yeah, sure. So my story then continued with trying to figure out how I was going to move forward with having this baby. And now I have, no embryos on ice and I'm in my early 40s. And I looked into my insurance options. And my insurance options, and I would implore everyone to look into your insurance. So do you have fertility coverage? Does your, so if you are doing the single mother journey, or if you're listening and you're doing this with a partner, because you can look at your partner's insurance and switch insurances as well. So you're looking to see if you have fertility coverage. And a lot of companies today are adding supplemental fertility coverage as well, like companies like Carrot. And those are third-party companies that offer some level of fertility coverage. So I would say look into if you have fertility coverage. I was fortunate enough to have fertility coverage with my previous employer. So therefore, I was able to utilize funds in order to continue on with my journey. So I went through then, and then I'll talk through the PGA testing. I then went back to a doctor here in Los Angeles and ready to get some more eggs and try to fertilize. And at this point, I actually had changed up my sperm donor because, there was some time in between this. So I found somebody else that I had really liked, who's now today's donor. And funny story on that is throughout this process, I was in a vacation in Mexico and I get a phone call from the donor bank. They're like, we just got 6 more vials. I'm like, I'll buy them all. And I was like, this is the most expensive trip I've ever had in my entire life. But I knew I wanted him to be the dad too, or the donor dad, as you call it, wherever I call it.
And what helped you make that choice of who the donor dad is? What should people look for?
And there's a lot of people listening, like the whole idea of dad, because I know he's not a dad, right? But he's my donor. He gave her life. Everyone has a different journey in how they choose their donor. One of the first things you need to do is talk to your doctor about if you're CMV negative or positive, because most people globally are CMV positive, like 80% or so of the population. And therefore, if you're positive, you can choose a positive donor, which there's lots of them, right? Because of the stats. I happen to be CMV negative, which meant that the number of donors that I could choose from the pool was quite limited. About 10 to 20% less. So that you have to start with just looking into CMV status. Then you have to look at your genetic testing. So when you go through fertility, you will get tested by third-party companies that will look at, I think the stats are up to about 500 markers these days. So they're looking at all these things that you may carry, because of course you don't want to be partnered with somebody that has the same issue as you. If somebody has, if you have genetic issue number 1 and they have genetic issue number 7, it's no problem to procreate with them. But you want to make sure that you don't have the same exact one. So you do those 2 pieces of testing, the CMV and then the genetic testing. And then you go on to the sites. And the 4 sites that I'm familiar with, and I'll share which one I used, are California, Cairo, Seattle Sperm Bank, Fairfax, and then Zytex. And I'm sure there are others as well, but these are the 4 main ones that I was familiar with. I ended up looking at all of them. So I had subscriptions to all of these different banks, and you just refreshing, any new donors. It's like going onto the apps, like in dating, trying to find a new match. And you're like, anyone new? Anyone out of a breakup? So constantly refreshing. And with Zytex, I was also able to search for adult photos, which was important to me. I did want to know what my donor looked like as an adult, not just a child. A lot of friends that have gone through this experience have chosen just to look at the child's photo. So there's no right or wrong. That was just my own experience. I also look personally also for education. You can't look at intellect. I mean, look, Zuckerberg didn't finish college, right? So he would say, didn't go to college, and you might not choose that person as a donor. However, with the limited information you are given, which is, did you go to college? What do you currently do for a job? I felt it was important to utilize that information to try to find somebody that had more of an intellectual journey. They also give you written essays. Some of the banks allow you to listen to voice memos as well. So I did read the written essays to understand a little bit more about the donor, as well as they give you temperament reports. So they work with companies like I think mine was, I forget, Kinsey profile, and they look at if you're an extrovert, an introvert, and all those things. So you get to read a little bit more about the individual. So that's how I ended up with the current donor that I have.
Yeah, so fascinating. And I can totally see the overlap with the online dating world where, you're kind of sifting through like, okay, who's the best potential match? So I'm curious, let's see, when it comes to, I can, empathize with this experience being really emotional and maybe getting into a place of, okay, and these are the to-do items, let's check. So I'm curious about how you navigated the emotional experience of, let's say, your eggs not successfully working out that first time around, and just, how that journey has been and how you were able to cope.
Yeah. So I will never forget where that call came from. I was in Park City going skiing, and right as I was about to go onto the ski lift, I got the phone call and that they didn't work. And it was this moment. I happened to be with 2 friends, so grateful that I had some support with me, but it was really just a shock moment. And I don't think I actually really even processed it, because I was on holiday and I was like, okay, well, I'll just figure out, what to do next. And part of what's been, this journey of mine, and I'll share a little bit more about the remainder of the journey, which was 6 more retrievals in order to end up with my baby. But this whole journey was really about consistently putting one step in front of the next and not stopping and not thinking about all the things that could work or could not work, and really just doing one step in front of the next. So what is the next thing I need to do? Okay, the next thing I need to do is figure out my insurance and get another egg retrieval going. And as I mentioned, in this time, I had found this new donor, but really just about staying focused on what what is your next step? So the next step for me was to find a local doctor. I interviewed about 4 or 5 doctors here in California. And for me, bedside manner was one of the most important things, as I, of course, looked at the stats and making sure the lab was great and that the doctor's stats were good as well. And there's ways to research that online that are public databases. But I also wanted to feel a genuine connection with somebody that was going to go through this process with me. And I ended up finding a doctor that I really liked. And we move forward. And again, I went through the entire process, which is 2 weeks of medications and shooting yourself up with these needles multiple times a day. No fun, but it's a means to an end. And 2 weeks later, going into an egg retrieval to then get 6 eggs at that time, which I thought was a good number, to then have no embryos made again. So I was back to square one. And honestly, I didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel at this point, but I just kept on going. So I went back to the doctor, and here we go again. And something that we did switch up, which I want to give some light to, is we ended up moving to mini IVF, which is a lighter protocol of IVF medications. So it's for those with lower ovarian reserve or an older age. Lots of info online. There are different reproductive endocrinologists feel differently about this. However, mine did like it. And we ended up trying it, and I did have some success with it. So you get a lower number of eggs, but potentially those lower number could convert. So I ended up doing a mini IVF cycle. And with that cycle, I ended up getting, I think 2 eggs, and 1 went to PGA testing, which is the genetic testing, and it came back as normal. And I think the math was that that's like a 6% chance that my egg at my age with that low of numbers would have been normal. And that's Kaya today. I ended up continuing on with my journey and not stopping there, because with 1 embryo, there's a 65% chance that a transfer will actually work. That means 35% chance that this baby that did end up taking wouldn't take. And therefore, I was like, I am only this age once. And I say this to everyone I talk to, like, you're never going to be as young as you are today. And with fertility, every day, every hour, every minute counts. So continue on this journey and don't just punt it forward. And I ended up doing another retrieval. And fast forward, I won't go through all the retrievals, but all in all, I ended up with 6 retrievals in one given year. So every other month, in between like a very busy job where I was traveling all across America, I would come back to LA, and for 2 weeks, I would take these medications and do another retrieval. And I ended up with a number of 3 total normal embryos at the end of this journey. But it was a lot of retrievals, a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of emotion, to bring you back to the question of how do you continue on with this? And I think what your ambition is, and you just one step in front of the next, and you get there. But you can't look at the bigger picture. You have to stay super narrowly focused in order, just because otherwise you get sad waking up every day. Like, this is I didn't get what I wanted. Oh, I'm still single, or I'm not. So if you can look at the bad side, or you can look at like the opportunity ahead. And I always chose to look at the opportunity ahead.
And what a testament, that 6% chance turning into Kaya. It really goes to show their statistics, but you don't have to be one of the statistics. But that being said, still, it sounds like scoot your boot, go ahead and do things faster, sooner rather than later. So, can you walk us through? I'd love to now transition into the journey of pregnancy and what that was like for you. And then if you'd like to share the birth journey itself.
Sure. Yeah. So before I got there, which I'll get right to the pregnancy, but as I was, ready to then implant and get pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
I had now my 3 embryos, and I was like, okay, I feel confident that I have 3 embryos, which I believe the stats are that it's a 95% chance of a pregnancy. And this is because the uterus doesn't age. So once you have a genetically tested normal embryo, and that's why I say, looking back at my younger self, I wish I had that, because then you have knowledge that you actually have a chance at pregnancy. Until you have that, you really don't know. So I felt confident that I had enough. And then I had a conversation with one of my best friends who had gone through 4 miscarriages before she ended up with her now 2 beautiful girls that are only a year apart. God bless her, raising these children 1 year apart from each other, and they're 2 under 2. But she was able to get pregnant, and she shared that she had worked with a reproductive immunologist in order to identify why she wasn't getting pregnant. And me hearing this, being the person that is very analytical, and I am a risk taker in some ways, but definitely not with these embryos, I decided that I would hire a reproductive immunologist to do testing on me to see if I would be able to carry, because I was scared about using these 3 embryos. Well, what if I go through 2 of them and they don't work, and then I find out there's something and I only have 1 left? And I, again, didn't have time or money to do this again. So I ended up calling and finding, and I did a ton of research. So I'm a real open book about this. If anyone wants to reach out and learn more, because I've done so much research on reproductive immunology. There are only a handful of doctors here in America that focus on this. And it's really the doctor that looks at, why is your immune system attacking the embryo? Why can't you stay pregnant? So I went through my analysis. I ended up hiring a doctor. I did this all virtually. So there are doctors you have to go to, and there are some that do virtual, and doing an additional whole slew of different labs of why this could be happening to me. Or I don't even know if it was happening yet, but I thought I was going to get a phone call of like, oh, Jess, you just wasted a ton of money and time of hiring us because you're good. And I got the phone call, and was actually the opposite. Not only did I have 2 issues that my girlfriend that had 4 miscarriages have, but I had an additional 3 markers. And what that meant is that I needed to go on infusions, as well as steroids, as well as blood thinner for the entire pregnancy, in order to hold this pregnancy. And talking about stats, had I not done that, there was like a 20% chance that I would have carried to term. So the fact that I was able to get ahead of that with so few embryos. So in the case you're in this position of where you do have this journey and you have few embryos to work with, reproductive immunology is, a safety net in some ways. And then for those who have had a really hard time staying or getting pregnant, also something to consider that the field in general doesn't necessarily look at with, the reproductive endocrinology field doesn't necessarily buy into all of the markers on reproductive immunology. It's an up and coming field. So it's a little bit more experimental, but I can say with success that it's worked for me and others. And then pregnancy. Okay, so now we're pregnant. So now we do all this, and I do all these infusions and steroids and shots, and then we implant. And the transfer itself is actually unlike egg freezing, which is a lot of hormones, and then you actually have to go in anesthesia for them to remove the eggs from you, and can be a bit uncomfortable, of course, because it's surgery. The transfer is quite the opposite. The transfer is more like a pap smear. You go into your doctor, and within 10 minutes, you have something inserted into your uterus, and then you leave. And when you leave, you actually are like walking slow because you think it can fall out. It can't. And you're all nervous about it, and you're getting, to get home. And I can't even remember if I had Ubered or if I had driven home that day or gotten a ride home that day, but nonetheless, very seamless and very painless process. And then it's the 2-week wait. So in pregnancy, something called the 2-week wait after an IVF transfer is waiting for 2 weeks to know if you have a viable pregnancy. I happen to be one of those people that was, I'm going to test at home, even they tell you not to. So I brought every pregnancy test under the sun. I can tell you that first response early result is the only one, because I've tried like 7 of them, that does tell you early, I think by day 6 or so, that you are potentially pregnant. And I remember peeing on all these different sticks, and I had them all laid out, and then seeing that first response test come positive, and you really just don't believe it. You think that there's something off with this test, and then you test again and test again. So I was a little bit of a crazy person on using these tests at home, but then I verified I was indeed pregnant, and I was texting my doctor and showing her these incredible results. And the thing is, after you do have a positive pregnancy test, you have to go back in and test to see if your HCG is actually doubling. So you go back in to get a beta test, which is the first time that they're going to test your blood to see what that level is. And by the way, HCG is the hormone that, I believe it's a hormone, might not be, but it's what's in your body that when you pee on the pregnancy ticks, it detects it. So you go get your levels tested, and then every 2 days after that, for about 2 more times, you go to ensure that it's doubling. If it's doubling, then it's a viable pregnancy. And then at that point, you go in a couple of weeks later for your 5 or 6 week fetal heartbeat scan. And that was the moment. And this was a big moment for me of where I'm by myself. I'm a single mother. I'm in the room, and they do the heartbeat. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, whoa, oh my God, I'm pregnant. Okay. How am I doing this? How am I paying for this? Where is she? Where are we living? Like, I need another bedroom. Like, all the things that the reality just set in. And it was, instead of this moment of like, oh my God, I'm pregnant, it was like, oh, wow. Oh gosh, in the best way possible, but just like oh my God. So fast forward, I ended up having an incredible pregnancy. I stayed on all of the immunology protocol. I was doing infusions. I was getting my blood tested every 4 weeks to make sure that all the blood thinners were continuing to work, etc. I then, first trimester, no fun. Many people will say this. You get through it. Second's much better. You feel like a human again. And then third trimester came and went. And then sure enough, we got into my birth story, which was a bit crazy, which was I didn't expect to give birth when I did because I was on blood thinner and I thought that I was going to get induced to get off that blood thinner so I can get an epidural. Well, baby Kaya had a totally different desire to come a little bit early into this world. And sure enough, my water broke 2 weeks earlier on my 38th week. And I ended up here in Los Angeles without my mother, who lives in Florida, who was going to come in for the birth of Kaya. At the time, she was unnamed, and she remained unnamed for a few days in the hospital, by the way. So she's baby Kaya now, but she was baby Nuremberg then. And all of a sudden I'm at my house and I don't have any family support. It's late at night and I call my doctor and she's like, yeah, your water's breaking, go to the hospital. So I ended up Ubering myself to the hospital. You can't make this story up. I literally Ubered myself to the hospital with all my bags and ended up in a pretty traumatic birth story of where the medications, I couldn't get a epidural for 12 hours because of this blood thinner. So they gave me nitrous oxide. Fast forward after 7 hours of laboring and screaming that people that do this at home are sadists because this is the most painful experience of your life. It turns out the nitrous oxide in the tank wasn't on. So they had to fix that hours and hours later. And it was quite traumatic, as you can imagine. And once they fixed that, then I was on cloud 9 until they gave me my epidural. And then I had a very, very easy delivery. She came to this world very fast. And then we had an incredible 2 days together in the hospital. My mom flew in, and then we came home.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a journey. Oh my gosh. And I feel like anyone listening to this, they're going to just like soak up so much like knowledge, inspiration, and I'd love to hear more about that moment when you first held Kaya, what that was like for you.
So as I am pushing, not to be too graphic here, you have all these people in the room with you and these incredible nurses are, helping coach you through your delivery because you're on epidural, you don't really feel things and they're telling you when to push. And as I'm doing this, one of the nurses says to me that we're going to need respiratory support because, and they don't tell me why actually at this point, we're just going to need respiratory support. We're bringing the respiratory team in. They won't remove her from the room, but you're not going to be giving your baby right away. And I had all these plans and I had a whole birth plan written down with cord clamping and with wanting her on me right away and going to just get all the things that you can read about. I'd listened to every podcast. So I gave them my plan, but sure enough, God had different desires here. So I knew that the respiratory team was going to come in. So she came into this world, they took her right away because she had the cord wrapped around her twice. So they had to cord clamp right away and then move her into respiratory. And then as soon as she was cleared, they put her on me. And it was this wild moment because she's on you and I couldn't see her face. I can just see the top of her head and she's laying on my bare chest. And I was like, I want to see your face. I want to see your face. And I kept on trying to move her head up, but she's this little teeny, 6-pound blob literally laying on me. And I was like, I just want to see your face. I want to see your face. And I kept on kissing the top of her head. And it was just this surreal moment that you just birthed this thing, literally this child, this being. And every moment since then has been just as surreal that I have a living human being that I am responsible for the rest of time. And that she continues to grow and, become a different person every single day.
So precious. And I'd love to hear, how old is Kaya today at the time of this recording?
She is 9 weeks and 2 days. And I just looked at that because today I brought her to the baby chiropractor, really fun thing to go to with her. Because we've also gone through some OT and PT for feeding issues and for trying, she's had a bit of a flat head. So we've had some things just like when they come, it's just the beginning of the journey. It's every day is a new journey. But I looked at the calendar today, it's like, how old is she? So she's 9 weeks and 2 days.
Oh my gosh, precious. And I'd love to hear about your relationship with your mom, how that has shifted since you've become a mom, and if there's anything that has been particularly surprising in the journey of having Kaya here.
Yeah, so my parents got divorced when I was 10. My sister was 13 and my dad moved out. And then when my sister went to college a couple years after that, my mom and I were just living together, and I moved high schools at that point. So it was just me and my mom. And my mom had to go back to work after that because she was not working for like 15 years when she was with my father, and they were married for 22 years. And as a single mom, and I never had a respect for the fact that she actually was a single mom, because I always thought, like, I had a family, I have a mom and I have a dad, and we don't live together, but I have a mom and a dad. And now looking back at my mother's experience of raising me from 10 years old on, didn't have anybody else in the household, and it was just us. And she had to go back to work to help with the income. And so I had a really great role model, but I didn't recognize that until now, frankly. And my mom and I have always had a great relationship, but I would say that, like many mom and daughter relationships, there was, some challenges and some bickering and all of those things. And don't come visit me for too long and, whatnot, or don't come here, I don't want to come there. And once I had this baby and my mom was in my presence, my mom she was supposed to be here for 3 weeks, and then we ended up making it 6 weeks. And that just shows a testament of how grateful I was for her support and seeing her in a different light. And I think that when a grandparent gets the ability to have their son or daughter have a child, it's almost like a second chance at parenthood. And our relationship is kind of in this new chapter now of where I respect how much she put into raising me as a single mom. And I hope Kaya recognized that earlier than 43, but also just how grateful I am that she's going to have a relationship with my daughter.
I love that, how, the full circle moment. And, another thing that came up for me is how forthcoming you were about your journey on social media. So was that a conscious choice, or what influenced you being really open about everything that you were going through, everything that you were learning?
Yeah. So during this IVF journey, I started sharing, and it's so interesting because I actually didn't share quite towards the end, until I was pregnant. And then once I was pregnant, like the Hoover Dam opened, and I was like, okay, I'm an open book. I'm going to share everything. I think for those that are going through this journey, it's quite a private journey many people keep it as a private journey throughout the process, because there's so many starts and stops, and you think like, oh yeah, I'm transferring and this can work. And then, it might not, or you do an embryo, you try to make embryos, or your eggs don't work, and you don't want to share that with the world. Right. So it wasn't for me personally until I had this pregnancy to share, that I then unpeeled the onion and was like, well, let me tell everybody how I got here, because Instagram and all these other social platforms paint a picture of like, oh, look, she has this wonderful life. She has this wonderful career, and she's so happy and has all these friends and travels the world and check, check, check. And now she's having a baby girl. And those are all truths. But underneath and in between those truths was this journey that was very hard and very challenging. And it was at that point that I decided that I'd just be open about it, because why not? And as I started to share and share more and share more, the number of women that reached out to me, and even men that would say, I have a friend going through this, would you mind talking? And the number of conversations I've had to this day, and I'm glad to thank you for giving me this platform to share to a wider group, because the amount of knowledge, you don't know what you don't know. And if I can even share one thing that will change the trajectory of somebody else's journey and give them a child, it is so worth being vocal about this. And that's why I'm so open about sharing and about, and as you know, I've shared a lot about reproductive immunology. I also follow a lot of people that are in this, that do share on Instagram. So when I was going through all of this, and I'll tell people to go to also Facebook and look up, like, for example, when I was doing reproductive immunology, I joined all of those groups. So I put in reproductive immunology into the search bar, and then I would join every single group. And I wasn't really posting, I was just reading and getting a ton of information. So that was a really great way. And also podcasts were a really great way for me to do some learning. But now I'm part of that group of sharing. So I'm now helping educate others and hopefully, getting one more baby into this world.
I love that full circle. And so this question is just for fun. You can keep it as high level as you'd like, but let's say that we're in a time capsule. We go 10 years into the future. It's 2034. What is your ideal family life like at that point in time?
So I always had a desire not only to be a mom, but to be in a marriage. Honestly, it wasn't even now I have a different view, which I'll share, but I really wanted to be in a marriage. I wanted to be married and have my 2.2 kids, or whatever the US average is, joke, LOL. Have a couple of kids and have that suburban house and my minivan or whatever it might be to transit my couple kids. And as I mentioned, like, or as we now know, it's not even mentioned, as my life has not turned out that way. That's not the reality of the fantasy that I had. Now, I do hope that I do meet somebody, but it is not my priority. So the last couple of years, my priority was getting pregnant. I didn't want this time to pass in my early 40s of, oh, I'm waiting to find this magic man that's going to come save the day. I took matters into my own hands. I wanted to be a mom and I chose motherhood. So for me, putting that front and center allowed me to then go down this journey and have my baby. And I'm 43 now, so I'm no spring chicken. And now, I'm open and I would love to meet that person. But look, at the end of the day, dating apps, they were quite challenging before I got pregnant. And I'll tell you, because I've been on them after, still the same. So will I meet somebody on a dating app? Could be, but I honestly think that I'm hopeful that in life, potentially, I'll cross paths with somebody that's in a similar life journey as me and is a single parent, however they got there. And if not, that's okay too. So in 10 years, if Kaya doesn't have a father figure in her life, that's more than okay. It's not, again, a priority. The priority is raising a happy, healthy, wonderful child.
Yes. And, on that vein, how do you define ambition?
I think if I had to go back to this conversation, keeping your eye on the prize, but taking one step at a time to get there. So really this, idea of when you have goals are really important, and having ambitions, very important, right? What that North Star is, but getting there can really be challenging. And sometimes you don't get to your ambitions because you just don't actually take the small steps. So breaking it down to small steps and getting to think about, how do I keep moving forward to get to where I want to go? Has been my secret sauce. I think in a lot of ways, a lot of things in life. And I'm not great at it all the times. But, I have a lot of great friends and a lot of great mentors that help me slow down and think, okay, what's the next thing that you need to do? And this is like advice, whether it's for fertility or for my job or for where I'm going to move or any of these things, because the ambition, the big picture, can sometimes be really overwhelming. So my ambition definition is just simply breaking those things down into smaller, more bite-sized, digestible pieces so you can move forward towards that North Star.
Mm. And so what does holistic ambition mean to you?
Then I would say holistic ambition would be all of the factors that can go into what you're looking to achieve. So it not just being so singular of like, okay, I want to have a baby, right? That would be my ambition. But all the ways by which I'm going to manifest and get myself there. And by manifest, I mean actually doing the do, because you can dream it all day, but you have to actually go through the steps of making these things your reality. So holistic to me is much more about the whole picture and not just, I'm going to have a baby. It's all the different ways that my entire life has to come together. My mental state, my physical state, my desire to continue forward, right? All of those pieces played a factor into be able to get to where I was going.
Yeah, all those pieces. And I love how you've shared your journey of just progression of even living in major cities and deciding to, stay in LA and grow your family there. Yeah, just this has been so informative. And I'm sure that everyone listening, there's something in there for them, right? Like no matter what life stage, you're very knowledgeable about these topics. So for those that want to stay connected and learn more about you, how can they do that?
Sure. So my Instagram is open and public. So it's J Nuremberg, which is J for Jessica, and then Nuremberg. And I have to spell it because otherwise you will never find me. And so I'm public there. I do post a ton of baby content. So if you want to see baby Kaya, you'll be able to follow along in our stories. I have not been posting as much lately about the IVF because I've just posted a lot about it. So if you go on now, you might see more baby Kaya content, but feel free to reach out and send me a DM if there is a question that has piqued your interest from today. I have a lot of information that I've curated over these years, whether it be from just the egg freezing process to the IVF process, which is like the transfer, the embryo making, all the way down to reproductive immunology, birth, and the hospital stay and all the things. So I'm really an open book. And if I can, as I said, if I can help one person on their journey, I feel like that's, I'd be really grateful to be able to do that.
Thank you so much for your time today, Jessica. And thank you at home for tuning in. Consider this your invitation to subscribe to be the very first to know of the next Holistic Ambition speaker in our series. Wishing you a beautiful day until next time.